Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. Let's just give a couple of seconds to see if anyone else is still joining. All right, I think everybody's in. We can begin. So thank you for joining us today on our webinar about Omni, the ultimate productivity assistant for IBM Planning Analytics. Let me begin with an introduction. My name is Jay. I'm the Managing Director of IT Link. We are essentially a FP&A consultancy from Singapore, and we have been solving problems in the field of FP&A since 1995. We have been working on TM1 since the early 2000s, and in 2015, we launched TM1, TM1 Data Connected Tool, and earlier this year, we launched Omni. So when our application first goes into production, everybody is happy. They're proud of the productivity gains. The TM1 developers, the users, the finance admins, everybody knows the model inside out, right? There are no issues. Whatever issues there are can be solved fairly quickly. However, as the months go by or even the years go by, things start to degrade. People start to get upset, frustrated, and this all happens because of documentation debt. And over time, your model gets increasingly complex, or you may have more modules, you may have more cubes, and more complicated logic gets added into the model. You may also have multiple developers working on the model. And what happens is that while everybody started on the same baseline, over time, communication isn't as tight as it should be. People start to develop different things and they do not know about it. Well, otherwise, there may be times, with month-end closing, when you're working under tight deadlines, you unfortunately just do not update the documentation. And as this goes by, as this creeps up, the technical debt, this documentation debt piles up. And essentially, what you have in your documentation is no longer a representation of your actual model. And it takes longer and longer in order to play catch up. And at some point, everybody just gives up. Otherwise, this is a common one, your TM1 expert, this may be the team that worked together to build the model in the first place, be it either from your consultants or even from your own implementation team, the finance team, right? They may go to another organization. When they go on long holiday, then what happens is that there's going to be a void where a lot of the institutionalized knowledge gets lost. And then what happens then is that when new joiners come in, they take a long time to understand the model. Right. So because of all of these, we developed Omni, and Omni will then help to visualize your planning analytics model. It will allow you to comb through your model through all of the cubes, dimension, processes, rules very easily. It will allow you to compare versions or environments, right? So this is like one version of your production against last week or last month's version, or it could be a comparison between UAT and production, dev and UAT. It will also help you to understand your POR assets. So we have had customers that have had 200-300 pages workbooks or tabs in POR, and essentially this function feature will allow you to look at all of those workbooks and see all of the cubes, all of the views, the processes, the navigations associated with these workbooks at one glance. Of course, it will also help you to analyze your model performance and look at your draw timings. So with all of these, Omni will help you to onboard new joiners quickly instead of taking months or weeks if they're really good for somebody to understand the model. The moment they join, they connect Omni, they're gonna be able to see and understand how data flows from one cube to another cube really quickly. With that, everybody will be on the same playing ground, and it'll help to resolve issues or bugs a lot faster. Straight off the bat, you can zoom in on issues, you can zoom in on the cubes that's causing problems, you can see all of the TIs, that are related, on all of the rules or feeders that's related to that cube, and isolate the problem from there. You can make enhancements faster and with better confidence because you know what's the upstream and downstream impact of a change. And with all of these, instead of letting planning analytics die a slow death, you can increase the value and adoption of the system, of the application, right? And bring greater productivity to the organization. All right, so having said all of that, let's jump into a demo of Omni. Okay, so this is the overview page where you can essentially select your different models, and you can connect the same model from production, from UAT over here. And every time you click on refresh, a new version gets updated. So you can toggle between the different versions and see your model as of a snapshot of time. And this is really useful for, like snapshotting your model before deployment and after deployment, and seeing things that may have been missed out as part of the deployment. And now when we click onto the select an environment and the instance and click onto the model, now we can see the relationship diagram. Right? So over here, we've made a very conscious choice to just limit it to the cubes and the data sources at most, because we have seen models with 200, 300, 400 cubes. And if we were to layer on the processes, the rules, flow, and everything, it becomes extremely complicated. So let's say now you've already identified that you want to understand the income statement cube more. You come over here to the income statement cube, click in, and then from here, you will be able to see how the data flows between the revenue cube all the way to the income statement cube through these two TIs over here, right? And then you can toggle between the processes and the rules, right? And for the rules, you can see the feeders and the rules. And then once you zoom in into a process, you can then see the data source, the parameters, and then all of the coding for the TI. Right. You can also compare between previous environment. So in this case over here, I've got no differences, but if I were to compare it against like S data, for example, because this process doesn't exist there, all of the differences get color coded in red. So this is essentially really useful when you have identified an issue, or you've identified a target for change, and you want to identify all of the surrounding objects for that, right? So case in point, it's the cube, and you want to understand all of the TIs that are affecting the cube, and to see what needs to be changed or what needs to be fixed in order to resolve an issue. Okay, my second favorite feature is, of course, the search feature. So over here, when you search for something, you can search either by the cubes, the dims, the processes, the rules, and the chores. And one of the other things that we have added is essentially a secondary search. So not only can you search by the content of the process, you can also search by the name of the process. Right, and this helps you to narrow down your search really quickly and find what you're looking for. So these two features, the model view as well as the search, are things that me and the team use on a day-to-day basis when we are resolving tickets or implementing change requests. Now, the third one essentially is the ability to compare your environment and your version. So over here, the use case for this is, as I shared earlier, you can either compare between one version of production, maybe like after deployment and before deployment, to see what has changed. And you know that I'm sure you have heard this a lot, when an issue happens, when a bug occurs or something breaks, the system owner will straight away ask like, what has changed, right? And so when you're able to compare against a different version, and you can see that the differences get highlighted over here, then you can answer these questions with confidence. So aside from comparing the differences, you can also generate a report, which will then download a file. And this file would show you the differences because if you have a lot of differences, it may not be easy to see. So this file over here will show you the differences. It will show you what type of asset or object gets added, what's the name of the object, and what the change is, whether it was added or removed in your current version against your comparison version. Right, so once you've done that, then this will help you to, if you compare UAT against production, let's say there is a ticket that hasn't been deployed, has been sitting in UAT for a long time, and when you compare UAT against production, you would then get a list of processes or a list of objects that may be related to the ticket, and you can do a complete stock take on what needs to be in a deployment package. All right, I'm going to stop here for questions before I move on to the next feature. Let me just take a look at the chat. All right, so we have a question from James about the performance. Okay, so over here we have loaded 24 retail and as data for today's demo, but essentially we have got a instance that has got 300 cubes and about 1,600 processes. It typically takes about 1 minute to refresh. So I think the performance is pretty okay. And it's not as if you are refreshing on a constant basis. You typically would only take a snapshot or refresh the model on a needs or on an event basis where you do a deployment or something's changing in the environment. Because if we were to do a refresh on a daily basis, then you would just be storing a lot of data on your model unnecessarily. All right, the next question is on scheduled refreshes. At this point, we haven't added scheduled refreshes into Omni. And the reason is it ties in very closely to what I just shared, which is essentially that if we were to, at the end of the day, the system does not know when you are making major changes to the model, right? So if we were to take a snapshot every time we detect a difference, or every time on a scheduled basis, like a daily, weekly basis, what's going to end up happening is that we're going to end up storing a lot of versions or a lot of snapshots that you have got no idea what checkpoints they are about, right? So what we have done at this juncture, at least, is to make a very selective, very conscious choice to not include scheduled refreshes, but just let us know if there is really a demand for it and there is a strong use case for it. I don't think there's going to be a problem adding it into the future. Okay, so if there are no other questions, then let's go on to the next feature. So we've talked about the model. Now let's just go down the line. So for the cubes and dimensions, over here you have a comprehensive listing of all of your cubes and all of your dimensions. When you toggle on the views and subsets, you can start to see all of the processes that are using a particular view. And likewise for the subsets, you can see processes that are using the particular subsets. And we know that this is really, really useful, especially in, and we all know that PA is extremely flexible and different developers do things differently, right? So what we have seen is that there are certain instances where developers do not add in like a sys, or do not add in any proper naming to differentiate views or subsets that are used by systems or processes, and to differentiate against what is used by the users, right? So what inevitably happens is that nobody dares to delete a view or subset or change a view or subset, and they just keep creating more. And so what this feature will do is it will help a new joiner to really understand what is being used and make changes with more confidence. The processes, this one is pretty straightforward. It's just a list of processes and the source and the destination objects. And for chores, I think over here we have broken the chores into active and inactive chores. You can see the frequency, and then you can take a look at the processes that each chore is calling. Now, moving on to the next one, this is the understanding your PAW assets, right? So first you import your PAW assets into Omni, and then from there you can view it. So essentially, I think I mentioned briefly, we had a customer that had 200, 300 apps in PAW. They had 200, 300 pages in PAW. And one day the CFO essentially said that the UI does not look as nice as it could, right? And then we undertook a UI revamp. And what that meant was that when we had to do a mass update of all of the screens and make sure that the screens that were there before and the screens that were there after had exact same functionality and were referencing the same data. And so it was the first time we did it was painstaking to go and screen through all the pages, see what cubes, what views they were using, what TIs they were calling, how the navigation worked. Right. So we created this feature. So now with this feature, you can see all of your PAW assets. This is the shared folder, just like what you see in PAW, right? And when you select your folders and you click on a tab, you can see the cube views and the navigation and the TIs that they are calling, right? And this really helps to do a stock take of what is being used where. Okay, on to the next feature. So the next one is logs. So logs is more for like a health check to understand the performance of your model over time. So what this is doing is that it is parsing the TM1 server logs. Let me just choose a date range. Right, so this log view over here essentially is just all coming from the TM1 server log. Right, you can search and filter through the logs. And you can see the chore timings, right? So naturally, if you see chores that are overlapping, that's a little bit of a yellow or red flag. If you see save data, this is not the chore timings, these are the chore execution times, right? So if you see like a save data chore overlapping with any of your other chores, that may suggest that you have a good amount of locking going on, right? And then this essentially can help to float and surface out issues where you can optimize the model and improve, you can improve on things. So over here, you'll be able to see your chore timings. Similarly, for your processes, you'll be able to see your process times and you'll be able to see the average duration. So naturally, if you want to optimize the model, you would sort by the longest running TIs, right? And then see what inside can be optimized. The other thing that we've added is this trend, 30-day trend, right? So what we have observed is that when you first deploy a TI, right, it can be really efficient, but as the data volume grows, the TI may take longer and longer to process. And if it's just a little bit at a time, I think that's fine. But if it suddenly spikes up, then that's something that we want to look at. So this is what this trend is for. Right, you can also analyze user activity, right? The number of active users, number of total users, and you can click in to see what processes they have run. You can also analyze your server health, your uptime, and all of the other metrics and stats. We have also added feed performance over here, so you can see which cubes, the feeders of which cubes are taking the longest to load. And this would then help you to do an analysis of what is moving the needle in terms of your PA server startup time. Yep. By now, I'm sure most of you in the audience would know how valuable and how useful Omni would be. Right? We as TM1 developers, we built this tool to be something that we can use on a daily basis and that we enjoy using. And this has been an internal tool for us for the last 1.5 years. We built this tool primarily because in 2021, a customer reached out to us to take over a model. And it was a challenge because they had more than 100 cubes and they needed us to take over quickly. And the same happened in 2023. The same happened in 2024. And so then we knew that we needed a solution that would help us to effectively onboard new customers that effectively help us to understand models quickly and efficiently, so that we can hit the road running quickly and bring value, to the customer quickly. And we hope that Omni will help you to do the same as well. All right, so I know today is supposed to be a short session during lunch, so I'm not going to hold you back any longer. Thank you for your time today, and I hope that you can see the value that Omni brings, and we're really proud of this tool. If there's anything else you want to check on, just feel free to drop me an email over here at j@itlink.com.sg. And if there are any features that you'd like to see in Omni, just let me know as well. And I hope to hear from you guys soon. Thank you.